The chances of Donald Trump being the next president of the United States have always been somewhere between decent and pretty high. A lot of people are saying it. They got even stronger after last week's first presidential debate, what with Joe Biden declaring war on Medicare, I believe it was. Nobody knows for certain. In any case, the Supreme Court has just raised Trump's chances even further. That is after ruling that Trump has, quote, absolute immunity from prosecution for some actions whilst president in the federal election case being brought against him. In case you've forgotten, Donald Trump is facing criminal charges on several counts over allegations that he conspired to subvert the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. But according to the Supreme Court, official actions committed by Trump that belong to, quote, the outer perimeter of his office as president, well, they're immune from prosecution. Examples include pressuring Vice President Mike Pence on January 6th and threatening to fire the acting Attorney General over the Georgia vote. Unofficial actions, however, could still be found to be criminal. Now, what counts as an official action has been kicked down the road, with the Supreme Court ordering a lower court to decide on a case-by-case basis which actions listed in the court case count as, quote, official. That means it's very unlikely Trump will face trial before the November election, if at all. And he seems pretty pleased about it, saying this: big win for our Constitution and democracy, proud to be an American. As some of the justices on the Supreme Court, though, are not so sure it's a win for democracy. The ruling split the court along political lines, with the 6 conservative judges voting in favour of Trump's partial immunity and 3 liberal judges voting against. This is a remarkable passage. In her dissenting opinion, Sonia Sotomayor said this: the relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune, immune, immune. Immune. Michael, that is, like I said, an extraordinary statement from Sonia Sotomayor. She is a liberal justice. She was given that position, I believe, under Barack Obama. Is it true? Because, you know, people like to be hyperbolic about these things. The judgment itself seems awful and is congruent with what she's saying there. But some of the powers invested in George W. Bush by the Patriot Act and so on, they also feel akin to the powers you would give a king, somebody above the rule of law. So is this really that new?
Well, I suppose the difference would be, so I mean, you know, the American president has phenomenal power to take out, I mean, the most people in the world, let's say, you know, the way they took out Qasem Soleimani, right? This is a senior foreign official. Donald Trump decides he should be taken out, and he's assassinated on in an airfield, I think, wasn't he? I think he was visiting Iraq at the time. And so if you're looking at sort of in terms of the international order, then the president can pretty much do whatever they want up to the highest level, right? When presidents get brought down, it doesn't tend to be because they helped organize a coup somewhere or because they killed a foreign dignitary. Normally, when it sort of impinges on domestic politics. And so that's the difference here, really. That's what Donald Trump has changed, whereby it used to be incredibly normal for American presidents to do whatever the hell they wanted outside of the United States. Now he's sort of trying to bring that same attitude of impunity to within the United States. Now, obviously, he's not the first person to have sort of gone over and above the rule of law when it comes to American domestic politics. But I think he probably is one of the first people to sort of do it so openly, so proudly, in such a way that I suppose does feel especially challenging and threatening to the system itself. Because, you know, at least with J. Edgar Hoover or whatever, now obviously what he did was absolutely terrible, but he had to do it in secret. And the idea was that sort of if a really, really intelligent journalist had sort of uncovered it all, then maybe it would have, to some degree, sort of those actions would have been militated against, or there would have been some sort of correction with Donald Trump. I mean, it doesn't matter if anyone sort of openly says what's happening, because he can just say, yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to do anything about it. My people don't care. So, the future of the Republic is under threat, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure. I am about that final point. But what sticks in my mind, Michael, is from 2017, there was somebody who, I think he was in Yemen at the time, Anwar al-Awlaki. He was killed in a drone strike, which was obviously, it was vetted, it was okayed by Trump. He was a US national. And what I found sickening at the time was that he was killed alongside his 8-year-old daughter, who was also a US national. So an 8-year-old girl, an American citizen, being drone striked by US forces. And not only was that legal, nobody saw a problem with it. And at the time, I remember thinking that, I remember seeing that rather and thinking, really? Nobody has a problem with the USAF drone striking an 8-year-old American national? I mean, where's the line here? When does that not become okay? And I do feel like there's been a drift to where it's now going. There's been that drift for a very long time. Actually, frankly, since the Patriot Act and like I say, the immediate response to 9/11. And I think liberal America is kidding itself if it doesn't think that. I mean, obviously many American liberals think that, but a hell of a lot of them don't. And a lot of sort of centrist Republicans were cheerleading that stuff. The never Trump people. They had no problem with drone striking an 8-year-old girl, including the fact that she was an American national. But they have a problem now. Makes you think. Michael, before we go, you weren't around last week, as I've repeatedly said I had to cover for you. That's why I'm suffering from my own cognitive decline. I didn't rest well over the weekend, and I was thinking about this week's election, which will be so much fun to cover. But I would really love to get your thoughts on some of the debates. What did you think of that debate between Trump and Joe Biden, the first presidential debate? Was it as bad as everyone was saying?
No, I have to admit, I haven't watched the full debate because it happened while I was at Glastonbury, but I've seen sort of the clips on social media and lots of the commentary around it. And I mean, I'm not sure what I can add because it was just, so terrifying, really. People are really going to struggle to vote for that guy. And I suppose obviously the standout line was Donald Trump sort of saying, I don't think he knows what he just said. Well, I don't know what he just said, and I don't think he does either. Very good line. I've seen today, because obviously there was a period where sort of immediately afterwards, the liberal establishment seemed to be seriously talking about, we're going to have to replace this guy. Now I'm reading that there's this big sort of PR drive by the people around Biden to blame his advisors. They said he was over-prepared. Now, if you think that anyone is going to have watched that debate and think, what's wrong here? That guy, he's over-prepared, right? No one is going to have seen that debate, seen the clips that I've seen, and say, yeah, the problem here is he was over-prepared, or he was wearing too much makeup, I think was another reason what they thought had gone wrong. It's clearly, this guy doesn't have the mental faculties to sort of perform well in a debate. I mean, you can't train someone to be better at that than they are. And it's, that shouldn't be an offensive thing to say. I imagine when I'm 81, I would struggle to sort of take part in a debate like that. He's obviously going to be 86 or 85, 86 if he sort of by the end of his presidency, if he is re-elected. And so, this seems to be another sort of signal of an empire in decline. Like everyone's saying, the only person who can get rid of this guy is himself. The only person who can decide he's not going to stand as himself. It's all basically down to what Jill Biden and his son think he should do. Which is just like, what? That's really crazy. Like, that's really effed up. If the American Republic sort of collapses because they couldn't persuade a guy who was clearly too old for the job to stand down, like, is there not someone else who can intervene? People also say, I keep reading this line that sort of, there's a problem that Kamala Harris is the vice president and she's not very popular because it would be much sort of simpler if Biden could just be replaced by his vice president. They say that would be really divisive in America. It's like, really? I feel like a lot of these lines are kind of made up in sort of media narratives and then they just get repeated as if they're fact. Is there really a huge section of American society who's really invested in Kamala Harris being the next president? I know, the argument is a sort of identity politics one, that she's, the first female person of color in that VP role. And if she's passed up to be the presidential candidate, that will cause disquiet. But I mean, America is a country full of adults. Right? I think if you explain, yes, we would have loved her to have been in the role, but she's not that popular. We're going to go for someone who's popular and can beat Donald Trump. I think most Americans just go, yeah, that reads okay. That makes sense. Let's do that instead of having this ridiculous contest where we're putting the guy who wants complete immunity to kill his political rivals. I mean, obviously that's the implication of Sandra Sotomayor. Donald Trump hasn't necessarily said he would do that, versus someone who can't finish a sentence without getting confused. It seems lots of the problems that have been created to sort of suggest this is irresolvable seem to involve treating Americans like children when it's really that the Democratic elite cannot get its act together.